Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I'm always humbled with the opportunity to work with educators such as yourself. I'm here today to talk about the difference between at-risk and wounded children. And I have to say this, and I wasn't planning on saying it, so I'm just going to say it out of my heart. I believe in who you are and what you do because I'm a product of who you are and what you do. I was a student who struggled, came from a father that struggled early on in his life with addictions. My home split. John Steinbeck once said this: to have 3 teachers in a lifetime to make the difference is the best of luck. Folks, I had the best of luck because of people like you. So that's the message behind what I'm going to deliver here today. So I found myself barely graduating high school. I think they graduated me as a favor. And I ended up wanting to work with at-risk youth. So I worked in juvenile corrections, juvenile detention centers, treatment centers, and when I would go work at these places, they would say, you know what, we're going to send you to these at-risk conferences. And these at-risk conferences, you're going to learn how to get this information and transform these kids' lives. And I would go get this information and I'd come back and I would apply the principles that I learned, and I found myself falling short. So today, what I want to talk about is a comprehensive approach to working with wounded students. Because what happened for me was something transformed my thoughts on the difference between at-risk and wounded youth. See, I thought kids we worked with were at risk, preventative in nature. And I found myself falling short all the time. So when I came back from these conferences, my wife called me one day, and she said, Joe, we had a problem with our 2-year-old son today. He was hurt very bad at our house. And so much so that I had to put him in the back seat of the car, and I was rushing him to the hospital to get critical care. She said, a police officer pulled me over for going 90 miles an hour. The police officer came up to my wife, had the rule book out, was ready to throw the rule book at my wife. He looked in the back seat and he saw a wounded child. He put that set of rules aside for a moment and he jumped into the first care responder role in the life of a wounded child. His job wasn't to perform surgery. His job wasn't to sew my son back together, wasn't to prescribe medication. He was a first care responder. He escorted my wife and son to the hospital. My son ended up being okay. My wife told me the story. I said, I think that's it. I think we've got wounded kids. And nobody in 2006 was talking about kids beyond at risk, kids that were wounded. It was this conference, High Schools at Work, that gave me my first opportunity. They asked me how many people I wanted to present to. I said, if I get 20 people in a room, I'll probably freak out. I went down. There was such a response. It shocked me. They had over 800 people in the grand ballroom. My other session for at-risk youth had 24. It struck a nerve with me that we have to research this. In 2006, 25% of our kids were dealing with trauma. Today, 47.9% of our kids are dealing with trauma. By 2020, nearly 11 million kids will be confirmed cases of abuse and neglect. 8,000 children will die of abuse and neglect, and 4.7 million children will experience the foster care system next year. They're coming to our show every day. I ask this question everywhere I go when I've been speaking across the world on this topic. How many of you believe that we have kids beyond at risk? And I see every hand raised. The second question I ask is how many of you feel prepared to deal with the wounds the kids are coming into school with today? And I don't think I've hit double digits in hands. So we have to take a comprehensive approach to this, working with kids beyond at risk. Because we need to have our teachers, our administrators, our community members involved as well. And it's interesting, as I've went around and talked about this, teachers would come up to me after my session and they'd say, what about the wounded teacher? And I kind of chuckled and said, yeah, I get it. And then it became more and more. What about the wounded teacher? What about the wounded teacher? So I started studying it. And And what I found out was everybody was saying they were burned out. And they really weren't burned out. They were experiencing what I call, or what's being researched, called compassion fatigue. How many of you are out there are tired? How many of you are compassionate? We're set up for compassion fatigue. If we don't tend to ourselves, like the oxygen mask on the airplane that drops, we have to take care of ourselves first before we can take care of the wounded children. We have to breathe first. After I did my first session, I developed a session on compassion fatigue I did at high schools at work. A lady came up to me and she had tears in her eyes. She said, "Thank you so much. Everybody told me I was burned out." She said, "I feel like I have so much more to give. And what I realized is I'm still compassionate. I'm just a little tired. I just need to get rejuvenated." So then we walk into our communities, and we're now starting to build community focus groups in the school districts in which I go. Those focus groups are built around community members, social workers, juvenile justice, after school, programming, clergy, mayors of cities. We're all sitting at the table and we're saying we have kids now in our communities beyond that risk, 47.9%. We need to continue to support each other to support our kids. One of the examples that we have is we developed, instead of suspending kids, we gave them community service. We found that our suspensions were cut, academics went up, graduation went up. The things we're all about, we found by working as a group of people. I'll close by saying this. Mother Teresa once said this: "The ills of society is based on the fact that we become indifferent to the needs of our brothers and sisters." When we become not indifferent to our needs around us, our children will be the beneficiary of all that. Thank you so much. What questions may you have?
Joe, I just wanted to thank you for your dedication and for your insight that has caused hundreds of teachers and literally thousands of students to begin to understand where they are, who they are, and what they can possibly be. Sincerely from a trauma-informed care specialist view, and all of the teachers that I work with, and many people here, sincerely, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about children beyond at risk, wounded kids? Thank you.
How did you get everyone to agree to do the community and service instead of the suspensions? Was that a district or was that school? How did you go about doing that?
That's a great question. Getting buy-in, total community buy-in is huge because, it's not one-dimensional. So one of the things we had to do is we had to sit down and ask everybody. And we did not get total buy-in. We got consensus, and we had a few outliers, but we decided that we were going to move forward. Those people that wanted to continue to do their own thing with maybe their own detentions or whatever they've done for years, but we band together enough of our staff, maybe 90% of the staff. The superintendent gave us a bus so we could take kids out into the community. And we just decided that we wanted to keep kids into community instead of kicking kids out of community. And we really saw great benefits from that. We just called it a SREB program. And I ask the question everywhere I go, how many people think suspensions work? And I don't see any hands raised. So we decided since it didn't work, we were going to do something different. And it wasn't just me. It was a team of teachers, administrators at the school. We ran it in 3 different districts I was at, and it was a little modified in each place because of dynamics, but it worked in all 3 places. It's a great question. Sometimes you just have to move forward, just get enough consensus and move forward. And you know what? The outliers ended up coming on board. One last question? All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate all that you do for our wounded kids.